Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start today's video with a story that proves blind loyalty to company policy can get real expensive. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. When no receipt, no reimbursement goes wrong. At my previous job, the company had a strict, and I mean painfully strict, expense reimbursement policy. The rule was simple and absolute. No receipt, no reimbursement, no exceptions, no gray area, not even for a $1.50 bus fare. It wasn't usually a big deal until I went on a business trip one month. It wasn't anything glamorous, just a 2-day conference in another city. But during those 2 days, I had a handful of small, unavoidable expenses, bus fares, street parking meters, and a few tips for service workers. All in all, maybe $20, nothing outrageous. When I got back, I submitted my expense report. I listed everything neatly, attached all the receipts I did have, and made a note explaining that some minor costs didn't produce receipts. I thought it'd be fine. Surely no one was going to die over $20. Wrong. The claim was rejected within an hour. My manager called me in, completely serious, and said, "You know the policy, no receipt, no reimbursement. It's not negotiable, it's for audit purposes." I tried explaining again, but he cut me off with his favorite line, "Policy is policy." All right then, you want to play by the book? Let's play by the book. A few weeks later, I had another trip scheduled. This time I made sure every single cent I spent came with a receipt. I didn't change my spending habits, I changed my approach. Needed a bottle of water, no quick stop at the gas station. I went to the most conveniently overpriced cafe downtown and bought a single bottle for $4.75 with a printed receipt. Normally, I'd take public transport for a few bucks, but buses don't give receipts, so I took a nice air-conditioned app-based taxi instead. Every ride came with a detailed e-invoice. When lunch rolled around, instead of grabbing a sandwich from a street vendor, I went to a proper sit-down restaurant. Made sure to add my tip to the bill, digitally of course, so it would show up on the itemized receipt. By the time the trip was over, I'd spent about $280. Every expense was justified, every one came with a proper audit-proof receipt. I turned in my report, neat and organized as always. A few days later, I got called into my manager's office again. He looked confused, then angry. "Why is your total so high this time?" he demanded. I shrugged. "You told me no receipt, no reimbursement, so I made sure everything had a receipt, even the water." His face turned red. He tried to argue that my expenses were unreasonable, but technically I'd followed the policy exactly as written. Finance had already processed the reimbursement since it met every audit requirement. The following week, a new memo went out to the entire department. Effective immediately, reasonable business expenses may be reimbursed at management's discretion, even without receipts. Given sometimes it takes a $260 lesson for management to realize that policy is policy, cuts both ways. Nothing like a company realizing policy gets expensive when someone actually follows it. You basically went from budget traveler to luxury consultant overnight, all because they wanted receipts for $1.50. The $4.75 bottled water detail killed me. That's the price of stubborn management learning math. And our second story. They said we sold their car after we towed it from our private property. The police had a different opinion. I worked in retail for 10 years and taught for 12, so I've met my fair share of entitled people. But last weekend, I think I unlocked a new achievement: boss-level entitlement. My husband, Tom, and I live about a 10-minute walk from the beach. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood with free street parking, which unfortunately turns it into a circus every sunny weekend. Tourists flood in, ignore the paid parking lot near the boardwalk, and treat our street like their personal overflow lot. To make life easier, we removed a few decorative poles from the edge of our small front yard to create a parking spot for my car. It fits perfectly, tight, but enough space to still get the bikes out of the shed. And to be crystal clear, it's private property, fully ours, verified by the land records and the city map. Cue last Saturday. Beautiful weather, the kind that turns otherwise sane people into parking gremlins. Tom, our son, and I decided to take my car to the petting zoo so that his car could stay home. We figured it'd make returning easier since beach traffic always chokes up our street by afternoon. We were gone maybe 3 hours. When we came back, I almost dropped my bag. There in my front yard was a stranger's SUV. Tires on our grass, back bumper kissing our flower bed. I blinked twice, thinking maybe I was hallucinating. Tom looked at me, and I could see the vein in his forehead starting to pulse. We called the non-emergency police line to check what we could legally do. The dispatcher didn't hesitate. Call a tow truck. We'll send an officer if there's any trouble. 20 minutes later, the tow truck crew, let's call them Mike and Ricky, rolled up. They were in great spirits. Apparently, towing illegally parked beachgoers was half their summer business. We showed them proof of ownership. They cracked open a couple of cold sodas I offered and went to work. 10 minutes later, the SUV was gone. Mike grinned as he handed me a business card. In case they come back angry, tell them to call us. We'll have a good show. I parked my car back in its rightful spot, and Tom and I went about our evening, peace restored, for about 2.5 hours. Then the doorbell rang. Standing there were the owners of the SUV, a middle-aged couple straight from Central Casting. Matching sunburns, sandy flip-flops, and the attitude of people who think the world owes them a parking space. Let's call them Kevin and Karen. Karen started with the sugary voice that already made my eye twitch. "Hi, our car is supposed to be here?" I smiled sweetly. "Yes, it used to be. We had it towed. You parked on private property." Karen's face fell faster than a dropped ice cream cone. "You can't do that. There's no sign." Tom joined me at the door. "You don't need a sign when it's our yard. You're trespassing." Kevin decided to chime in, puffing up his chest. "You little liar. You sold our car, didn't you? You probably made a quick buck." I held out Mike's business card. "Here's the tow company's info. You can pick it up anytime." Instead of taking it, Kevin started yelling, full red-faced, spit-flying rage. Karen started screeching about calling the news. I'm standing there, 19 weeks pregnant, watching this man try to step closer like he's about to barge in. That's when Tom snapped. He pushed Kevin back off the step and slammed the door shut. Karen immediately started pounding on the door and ringing the bell like she was summoning demons. Tom grabbed the phone and called the police. So there we were, me sitting on the stairs, hand on my belly, listening to Kevin and Karen outside screaming, "Thief! You're gonna pay for this!" When the blue lights finally pulled up, 2 officers stepped out, calm but clearly done with humanity. Tom went outside to explain while I stayed inside. Through the window, I saw Kevin flailing his arms and Karen crying dramatically like she'd been wronged by the universe. Tom handed the officers the tow company card, showed proof of residence, and even called Mike from the tow crew to confirm the tow. Mike must have said something entertaining because one of the officers smirked. Finally, one cop turned to Kevin and Karen. "You've got 2 options," he said. "Leave quietly or leave with handcuffs. Which is it?" Karen shrieked something about suing. Kevin muttered a few words I won't repeat, and then they stomped off down the sidewalk, still yelling about how unfair it was they couldn't park wherever they wanted. 10 minutes later, Mike from the tow crew called back. "Hey, just checking on you folks. The couple came by the lot losing their minds. We told them the storage fee went up every hour. You should have seen their faces. Made our day." I laughed so hard I almost cried. You're my new favorite people. The next morning, Tom and I installed a small metal sign next to our driveway. It reads, "Private property. Cars will be towed." We even screwed it right into the side of the shed just for emphasis. This is why private property signs exist, not for strangers, but for Karens who think every patch of grass is public. You even offered proof, cops, and customer service from the tow guy. Perfect execution. My favorite detail, them paying hourly storage while blaming you for their beach day going south. And our next story. I'm a cashier, not a daycare worker. So a bit of context. My store is a well-known chain store, and I work as a cashier, which includes the self-checkout. Anyway, this story comes from a couple of days ago. So I'm working in the SCO area, and as I'm making my way toward the waiting line, I overhear 3 customers arguing with each other. I walk over and ask if there's a problem. From what I gathered, one of the customers, an Instacart shopper, tried to cut the line, and the 2 other customers were calling her out for it. When I asked them if there was a problem, they said the issue was resolved, though Instacart lady was pissed. I said, okay, then went back to my duties. A couple minutes later, I have to go help Instacart lady with an ID check on alcohol. As I'm helping her with this, she says, that was uncool, letting me get bullied like that. I asked her to clarify because I thought surely I wasn't hearing this right. She continues, "You let me get bullied by 2 other customers." Okay, I guess I did hear that right. I told this lady, what exactly did she want me to do? You should have stood there and listened. Right, you want me to stand there and listen to you having a petty argument with 2 other grown adults when I have better things to do? Sure. Anyway, I told her it's not my job to resolve customer disputes. She said, that's fine, because I've told everyone's names and I'm going to report you. I told her, okay then, but again, it's not my job. Whatever, she snarls, and she walks out with the stuff. I shrugged and went back to work. It's wild how people like her can start drama, lose, and then immediately spin the story like they've been personally wronged by society. You should have stood there and listened. Yeah, because every cashier dreams of being a playground referee for grown adults fighting over checkout orders. And our last story. My entitled neighbor built an entire trail system on land that wasn't his. When I tell you my former neighbor was the most self-important man within 100 miles, I mean it. His name was Gregory, but everyone just called him Lord Gregory behind his back. He strutted around our quiet rural neighborhood like he owned not just his property, but the trees, the sky, and maybe the air we breathed too. For about 2 years, maybe more, Gregory hired landscaping crews every other weekend to beautify the woods next to his house. Only problem, they weren't his woods. The property belonged to a large agricultural trust that mostly left it wild. Deer, owls, natural trails, the kind of peaceful spot you go to clear your head. Or at least that's how it used to be. Then came Gregory's reign of noise and stupidity. Picture this. You're trying to enjoy a quiet Sunday morning coffee on the porch. Birds chirping, sun filtering through the pines, and then a pack of skid steers and chainsaws crank up like a NASCAR pit crew in the forest behind your house. Every weekend, without fail. He didn't just carve out a few walking paths either. The man practically redesigned the ecosystem. He cleared acres of trees, installed little bridges across gullies, and even had retention ponds dug, complete with fake ornamental rocks and decorative lighting. One time I saw the landscapers rolling in pallets of saplings that he had them plant in neat little symmetrical rows like it was his own private Versailles. I talked to one of the crew members once, just out of curiosity. The guy wiped sweat off his forehead and said, "He's paying top dollar for this," said he's enhancing the property value. I asked, "You mean his property?" The guy laughed. "Nah, boss, this isn't his land. He says it's community space." Community space. Yeah, sure, buddy. Except the community part was him, his UTV, and his overfed hunting dogs. Turns out the entire project was so he could ride around playing English Lord with his pack of hounds. I wish I were exaggerating. He even bought a tweed vest and one of those floppy hunting caps like he'd seen in some BBC countryside drama. Every few weekends, you'd hear him rev up his UTV and yell, "Hey-ya!" like he was chasing foxes through the English moors instead of tearing through a forest that didn't belong to him. He barely hunted. I think the dogs got more exercise barking at squirrels than he did actually hunting game. Anyway, word eventually spread that Gregory was spending a small fortune on his estate. I later found out he dropped somewhere around $500,000 on trails, landscaping, bridges, and ponds, all on land that wasn't even his. I couldn't believe it. But it all caught up with him. After about 15 years of playing aristocrat, Gregory's golden life started to rot from the inside. He'd been working at his family's manufacturing business, and by working I mean bleeding it dry with bad deals and expensive personal tastes. Rumor has it he nearly tanked the whole operation. His elderly mother, the real owner, finally fired him and cut him off financially. That was the moment the mighty Lord Gregory fell. Within 6 months, the estate went up for sale. I drove by one day and saw the for sale sign out front, and I'll admit, I smiled a little. By the next spring, he was gone. No farewell, no apology, no trace but the ruts left in the dirt where his UTV used to tear through like a bulldozer on espresso. Now, years later, his grand trail system's going to hell. The bridges are rotting, the decorative ponds are overgrown, and one of those fancy retention basins he built is clogged completely. Instead of draining, it overflowed, rerouting muddy water downhill and washing out one of the best natural trails in the gully. I walk through there sometimes or ride my quad, and it's honestly kind of poetic. All that money, all that noise, all that arrogant pride turned into mud and weeds. What really twists the knife is how predictable it was. Gregory was notorious around here for stiffing contractors. He'd get a crew to do some massive project, then suddenly dispute the invoice when it came time to pay. Always just enough to hurt, but not enough for most small businesses to bother suing over. Word got around, of course. Eventually, no one local would work for him. He had to start bringing in companies from 2 counties over. The man couldn't build goodwill if he tried. Last I heard, he was renting some generic suburban house in a gated community across the state line, living off whatever savings he hadn't blown, pretending to be nobility. Meanwhile, the woods have started to reclaim his masterpiece. Grass is pushing through the gravel, the ponds are mosquito farms, and the bridges sag like drunk skeletons. Now nature's taking back what was hers, one muddy, collapsing trail at a time. Every time I ride my quad through there now, I pass by the remains of one of his little bridges and think, congratulations, Gregory, you built a monument to your own stupidity. And Mother Nature's tearing it down for free. And the ending's the best part. It wasn't a heroic citizen's arrest or a dramatic court case that took him down. It was his mommy firing him from the family business. The mightiest fall is always the one that comes from within. He was a spoiled kid whose allowance got cut off, and the entire imaginary kingdom he built just evaporated. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.